All right, let's welcome in our friend from Husker Online on3.com, where you see him, you read him, and also 93.7 The Ticket in Lincoln, where the place where you stopped by, Sip, between 6 and 8 was just on TV here in Omaha.
Help me with that.
Did you guys have somebody get shot, like across the street from the radio station there?
I have no idea.
Yeah, they had police tape up, and Channel 6 here in Omaha was doing a story.
If that happened, it happened after I left. I left at about 8:00.
Oh, I don't think it was today.
Yeah,
I don't think it was today.
Like last night, maybe.
Maybe, I don't know.
Oh God, really?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, you live in Crime Town.
Yeah. Okay. No. I mean, there's been some problems downtown though of late. I mean,
okay.
It was after one of the earlier games this year when I drove home. Oh, it was a night game, probably the Colorado game. It was the Colorado game. And God, there was a shooting, right down the street from the Ticket.
Yeah,
so apparently there's another one.
That one turned into a fatality. Yeah. All right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that shooting that Saturday night was a fatality.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So
it was.
Okay.
Hey, you do this well. The transition.
Will let's talk some football, Sip.
Yeah, let's talk ball.
Yeah. Hey, no, before we talk ball, did somebody said they were listening to you, and are you giving praise to UCLA?
Oh, yeah. It was all over our message board on Husker Online. I didn't really praise them. I just said they're not terrible. And that's the debate. Then ensues this debate of, is UCLA not terrible? I mean, I guess what I wrote on the message board to defend myself was they're a Power 4 team, so they can recruit, generally do recruit high caliber athletes. They're paying their coaches a lot of money. They're going to be formidable in some regard. And I did watch them play Minnesota, and I watched them. They should have beat Minnesota. I mean, they had Minnesota beaten, and that alone tells me that they're just not horrific. They're probably the second worst team in the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Purdue's the worst, but there's probably a pretty good battle there.
Okay, so let's.
If UCLA and Purdue played right now, I imagine that'd be a close game.
Yeah, and sickos would watch. Okay, so on that scale, because you've done this on every show you've been on, and you've written about it this week, we're trying to figure out, okay, what pecking order does Indiana fit in? As we're 2 days away from this game, Indiana is what? Good, not great, very good, intriguing, about to get exposed. Where do you land when you look at Indiana and what Nebraska is about to face?
I'd say intriguing, and like Bill Bush said it today, so I hate stealing it, but this is a truth game. Like you find out a lot about your program in this game, both teams. It's that sort of game. I can't go any further than intriguing with Indiana. I've looked at, I look at their personnel, and it's good. It's not eye-popping good though. I think they are really well coached, especially on offense. I think they'll do a lot on offense. It's going to test you. You got to be smart about your keys. There's a lot there, and here's the thing. They do have a quarterback who's starting to get some Heisman mention,
mm-hmm.
and that gets your attention, and his numbers get your attention. A 73.8% completion rate gets your attention. 14 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions gets your attention. His size gets your attention. His ability he's not a stationary quarterback. Even at 6'5", 223, he can maneuver, and he can get out and go if he has to. I mean, that's not what he wants to do, but so I want to see a really intriguing game, and that's the best word. What am I getting at here? Here's what it is. How is Indiana against a real defense?
Mm-hmm.
Because they haven't faced one. What will that look like? What will that picture look like? when they face a legit top 15 defense? That's what I don't know. How would you know right now?
Well, and I'd go further with this, Sip. I asked this question, or at least in my area of confidence with this game for Nebraska, it's not only having Tony White and that defensive staff, his coaches, but also veterans that can get a game plan, can process it, and can also use the Illinois game as a little bit of a chip that if there's one side of the football or one sideline that takes advantage of the bye week more so, not knowing as much about Indiana, I know they're going to throw some things at Nebraska, but I feel very good about that part of it, the preparation that Nebraska will put into trying to solve this Indiana offense. Am I giving this defense and more importantly the staff too much credit and thinking they will be dialed in? It's going to be Indiana that's going to have to make the adjustment?
Oh, no, I think, no, I think there's a lot of validity to that conversation, but it works both ways. I mean, Indiana's offensive staff gets 2 weeks to find vulnerabilities in Tony's defense, and there's always vulnerabilities in any defense. Sometimes they're very slight, but I would just say that coaching element is really important right now with both teams coming off of a bye week. It's really, this is a game where you really watch. If you're smart enough to ascertain who did the better job, that's meaningful because both staffs are searching for vulnerabilities, tweaking, even if it's minor stuff that can be huge. I think Nebraska got out coached against Illinois.
You're not wrong.
I don't really want to see that again. I think you can provide pretty vivid examples of it. The overtime play, for instance, where the Pat Bryant leaked out, and Tony admitted they had never seen it. It was just good coaching. It was a good coaching maneuver by Illinois, and there was more than one in that game. So, that part of this conversation is gigantic. Yeah. Everybody's making a big deal of Kurt Cignetti. Let's see what Cignetti versus Rule looks like.
Well, on that, I want to read you something, and you heard this last night, or you've now seen it. Rule, because I think there's a lot of attention to Indiana. Rule wants to remind people that Nebraska's still good. They're 5-1, can get better. I'm going to quote a couple of things from something he got into last night. This is the Huskers versus everybody else. This is the Huskers against the world, and not in a bad way, but no one is going to give us anything. I said a couple of weeks ago, I'm here to fight for Nebraska, and I'm waiting for our players, and I think they are. I want them to go fight for Nebraska. I want our fans to fight for Nebraska. I don't want us to fight each other. I want us all to come together and fight for something. Who do you think he was talking to, and what do you think his message was and what he said on his radio show last night?
I don't know. That's an interesting quote. I think some of it is Rule is kind of taking advantage of this underdog role, which is good. Yes. Nebraska's not in this, and they're seldom. Nebraska is seldom in situations where the focus is not on them. They're in that situation. That's good. That's a good situation to be in. They're good. Nebraska's good, legit good, and the focus is not on them. So there's not pressure that way. It also might be Rule sort of trying to alleviate some pressure on his players. Just rally people behind him. It does seem like people are kind of, I don't know. This is a complicated place, and the negativity gets pretty. It's because there's so much interest and there's so much passion. If a team loses, even if Nebraska would lose close to Indiana, a close game, there's not only not going to be a good feeling, it'll spark up those sort of uncomfortable conversations that are just unpleasant, I don't know. I really don't know what he's getting at there. I like it. I like to hear him talk like that. I think sometimes I think it's unrealistic to get everybody rolling in the same direction around here.
Well, I think the underdog stuff, I think you're spot on with that. Because you're right. There aren't many games, whether good Nebraska or bad Nebraska, where Nebraska isn't the focus. Nebraska really hasn't been the focus at all this week. So maybe he's a little riled up by that.
Maybe a little riled up. Now, this is good conversation. I just think I would think he would embrace that. Like, I think it's a good spot for Nebraska to be in just this week. I don't mean all the time. You don't want to be, like I've said that, I've railed against that underdog thing for, I've done it before, where you don't want to always be the underdog because it means you're not very good. You want to be the team that others are trying to knock off, and you want to be the focus. You want to be able to handle all that. But I just think in this instance, there's just this instance, this week that I'm, I just look at this week and this week only. It's a good thing for Nebraska. Let people talk about how great Kurt Signetti is. Let them talk about, is Indiana real? They're playing in front of their big crowd, and everybody's there to kind of size up Indiana. And by the way, let's see how good Nebraska is too. That's good. That's a good spot to be in. Nebraska's a good team. If they're a good team in an underdog role, that's about as good as it gets. Mentality-wise.
Yeah. Well, Sip, we can't have the conversation about Saturday without addressing an area that Matt Rule is actually confident will look better, and that's special teams. If there's an area that, based on what Matt Rule said, that looks better on Saturday compared to what we've seen from a special team standpoint, where do you think it's most realistically happening?
Well, I'd be really surprised if they get a punt blocked, let alone two.
Mm-hmm. That would be an improvement. That would be an improvement too.
Yeah, I think I'll be sort of surprised if they get another one blocked this season. I mean, I know that's been thoroughly addressed. I think that I don't think we have to worry about that. I mean, the part of the special teams, really the only part that is causing, I would think that I would be really concerned about is just the kicking operation. The field goal PAT operation, snap, hold, kick.
Mm-hmm.
Snap, hold mainly. How's the snap? I believe John Holt's a good kicker. But I believe that John Holt's not at a point in his life where if the snap's bad, he can adjust himself and be okay. I think he's kind of at a point right now in his career where it needs to be. I'm not saying the snap and hold need to be perfect, but we're not talking about Harrison Buckner here. We're not talking about 31-year-old who's had a bunch of huge kicks in his life, right, and can do it if it's not perfect. So that's that part of the operation I'd still watch pretty close. And just a long snapper in general, even on punts. I'd still watch that part.
High scoring game or low scoring game?
God dang, that's a good question. Really, I'd like to think Nebraska's defense is good enough to hold that team to about 17, and then a low scoring game would be 24-17 win, Mm-hmm. And I'd like to think that can happen. I'm kind of clinging to. I haven't made my prediction yet. I think that can happen. They're not. Indiana's not so good, for instance, at running back that you shouldn't have to worry about that part so much. They don't have a Jeremiah Smith. They don't have a receiver you'd look at and say, "Oh God, how are we going to handle him?" Mm-hmm. I mean, they got number 13. I think his number 13 is good. Elijah Sarrett. He's good, but he's not. He doesn't blow your mind in any way. You should be able to handle it. Now, the thing that, like I say, I guess goes back to my biggest concern is their quarterback. Why? Because he's an old guy. He's big. He's experienced. He makes good decisions. He'll operate an offense at a high level, and you're going to have to respond to that.
Sip, the aggressiveness of the Nebraska offense has been discussed on this show, and I know it was brought up to Matt Rule on Monday and even to Marcus Satterfield of if it's looked different, taking the foot off the gas, so to speak. In this particular game, given the preparation time as well, what's your expectation of what they try to do offensively? And again, like special teams, what realistically does this offense look like on Saturday with a little extra time and some things to draw back on?
Well, I don't, it's hard. It's hard. I always just go back to what Rule wants, and that's he wants to be able to run the ball, pound it, have an inside running game, run outside zone a little bit, inside zone. You always hear him talk about running counters and power and duo, and then work off that. I think they can do that. Sometimes I'd like to see the focus narrowed a little bit in terms of who they're getting the ball to, but I don't know. I don't know how to answer it. It's the offense has been somewhat perplexing to me. Why they haven't been able to do more. Mm-hmm. Some of it is a conscious decision to, I think, be conservative, get a lead and be conservative. Don't ask your freshman quarterback to have to do a whole lot. Now, at some point, though, I think you're going to have to. I almost want to see him get down 17-3 and have to turn Dylan loose a little bit and see what it looks like, because I think it looked pretty good. But I think the answer is what Rule always says: we want to hammer it and work off that. That's been his MO.
Yep. It will be interesting. It's a big game feel. I think it's a very underrated game. Michigan, Illinois might get a little bit more juice in the league, but there's 11 a.m. for a reason with the Fox pregame show there. It should be a lot of fun. Sip, safe travels. Enjoy it. Look forward to your reaction to what happens on Saturday.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
Be good. That's